All right, what up, y'all? Welcome back to Manhood for Men and the people who love them. I hope that these episodes have been blessing you, that you're learning something, that it's been insightful. I mean, I've had some great feedback. Thank you so much, because feedback is how we grow and it's how we get better. I'm excited about today's episode. We're taking a little bit different approach. If you've never been to Manhood, this is a conversation for men and for the people who love them. That's right. We know ladies are watching, and ladies, feel free to watch, because the absence of men in a lot of necessary spaces has created a missing perspective. That's what I call it, the missing male perspective. And so we not against each other. We on the same team. God made us together. And so this is just a perspective that men get to have, and the people that love them. So we give biblical principles, we give proclamations and practical tips. And so this episode is going to be interesting, because this is based on some of my mentors and some of my teachers. The question was asked, how exposure raises expectations.
Because we are the church. Brothers, lift up a shout.
Manhood, a new YouTube series by Dr. Jermone Glenn for men and the people who love them. Tune in live on YouTube at 7 a.m. Central, or watch anytime on YouTube at Jermone Glenn.
We always say exposure raises expectations. And anytime God exposes you to something, it's because he's trying to increase your expectation. God isn't trying to tease you. When he exposes you to something, he's increasing your expectations. And so God will often put you in environments where your expectations are increased because of exposure. And so someone asked me, says, so if exposure raises your expectations, who are some key people that gave you some pivotal experiences that shifted your perspective and elevated your expectations? Now, I really don't get into all my personal relationships. I honor my teacher in a book called Mentors. If you don't have it, it's a great book that you can learn. And I added up all the years of ministry that have been poured into me, and I realized that over 120 years of mentoring and ministry have been poured into me. So anytime you talk to me, not only do you talk to me with my own experiences and the wisdom that God downloads, but you also talk to my teachers and all the people that poured into me. I am my teachers, I am my mentors, and so are you. And so if you don't honor your lessons of your teachers and the people who taught you, you can't really access or utilize the lessons that you learn. So never discount or discredit anybody who was used pivotally in your life. Even if they're no longer in your life, they were used in a significant area of development, because it takes a lot of men to make a man. I always tell people it took a lot of men to help make this man. And so even today, as I'm going to name a few, I will not name them all, and I cannot name them all, but I'm going to tell you how key experiences of exposure raise my expectations. I'm going to be vulnerable and a little bit reflective here, but I hope that you really gain. We usually go about 10 or 15 minutes. This one might go a little longer, or maybe we'll break it up in a couple episodes, but I really want you to understand some lessons on how manhood is modeled. All right. So we're going to jump into it. So the first person, of course, the first man that shaped my perspective or shaped my paradigm was my father. And my father is interesting. He is still alive. We have a great relationship. But growing up, we had a contentious relationship. It wasn't him. It was me. And it wasn't really because he was anything bad. He was just going through a rough patch. And when I grew up and realized who he was and what he was enduring, double master's degree, degree, criminal justice, sociology, growing up in Reaganomics, man, didn't even know his father. He introduced his father to me at the same time his father was introduced to him, and instead of taking that moment, he literally let me have that moment, right? So I thought that I was meeting my grandfather by way of introduction of my father. My father was meeting his father for the very first time at the same time, but he never even told me because he wanted me to have the moment. And so my dad was enduring through a lot of things, and when I became a man, that's when I understood him as a man. And all the things that I try to point out as areas of weakness really was much respect and strength that he had to fight and grow through. And in the midst of all of this, he still was raising up his children and building his family and sticking to it and developing. And I remember, because of the context of the contention of our relationship, because my dad wasn't extremely relational, he grew up in a time where being a father was about being a provider, not being a friend or not being accessible or emotionally available. So he had a job, he was taking care of the bills, he had a roof over his head, he was a father. And so in being a father, that was his position and his role. But one of the things that he said to me, he was very clear on my identity, because even sports, I was in sports, but he wouldn't let me really get in sports because he said, Jermone, you're going to be athletic, but you're not an athlete, right? What? You're going to be athletic, but you're not an athlete, so don't waste your time in sports. Yes, be athletic, but don't be an athlete, because you're going to make your money with your mind. So he would have me read books and copy out the dictionary and all these things, learn words and linguistics, language, and just challenge me on conversation, and just would make me be a deep thinker. And all these things that I felt penalized for as a child, he was very intentional about who I was and how my purpose was supposed to be developed. And so while I thought my father wasn't present, he was very present and purposeful. He just wasn't present in the way that I thought he should be. And one of the things that he said was, he said that you are an astronaut, right? And I was like, I don't want to be no astronaut. He's like, you're an astronaut. But he was shaping my paradigm. It wasn't until I got older that I understood that being an astronaut, he didn't mean physically or literally. He meant like exploring new territory and going into realms and being unconventional and moving into spaces that had never been developed. My dad really spoke that over my life, and he helped shape how I saw myself, so I became comfortable with being different and unique and unusual. And I didn't force it, even though in that moment I fought him back because I didn't understand it. But when on my 21st birthday, I remember I called him. I said, Dad, when you said I'm an astronaut, did you mean? He said, yes, that's exactly what I meant. And so I'm thankful that even though my dad didn't give me the version of the relationship that I thought I should have, he gave me the most important thing, and that was my identity. And he helped me to understand who I was. And so there's men listening right now. Don't underestimate the language that you speak over your children, your lives, of your sons, of your daughters. Like, even if you never had it spoken over your own father, you give what you wish you had, right? Be who you needed when you were your children's age, and make sure that you lean into the identity, because if you don't tell them who they are, somebody else will tell them who they are. So my father helped shape my identity around the idea of me being an astronaut, right? So reflect. So as I think about that, I think about the scripture principle, Ephesians 3:20. Now unto him that is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all we could ask or think, right? So God was really shaping me out the box and giving me paradigms and perspectives outside of the regular formalities of what people thought it should be. And so I honor my father. I honor the lessons that I learned. He taught me how to dream big. He taught me how to pursue the extraordinary. He taught me how to live in faith and courage. I got 100 million lessons about my father and things that I learned, but I thank my father for being the foundation of my thought of my identity. The second person is my grandfather. I appreciate my grandfather. My mother and father got married young. They were like 20 years old, and my father was still in the armed forces, so he was away serving, and so we were under the roof with my grandfather and my grandmother grandmother, which is my mom's father and mother. So I grew up with my grandfather, and I called him Papa because he was like a father to me and a father figure. But my grandfather was extremely good with his hands, right? He built stuff. He worked in the garden. He would cook. He would create stuff. He had the workbench in the basement. And so I really lean into exposure, raising expectations, because my grandfather helped shape how I work with my hands, how I create something out of nothing, how I learn how to cultivate an environment. My grandfather taught me how to create and the value of creativity and working hard. He was a hard worker. He was an engineer. He worked for the Chicago public school system as an engineer. He's the leader. And so he taught me how to engage in activities that would connect with creating things from scratch out of my hands. And so when I look back on my life, exposure raises expectations, because my grandfather taught me how to build something out of nothing and how to work with my hands, right? And so Proverbs 13:22 said, a good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. This is where I credit my grandfather to being a part of that exposure, raising my expectation. My godfather was next. Number 3, Papa Aaron is who I called him, Elder Wright. He was a man of God. He was the entrepreneur. He was a God-fearing man and taught me in church. I would hear him pray. He taught me how to pray. He taught me how to worship. He loved God. He loved his family. And he was the man that I marked and I modeled my faith. I saw faith even as a child. And he was a barber. He cut my hair, and I also learned a little bit how to cut hair as a result of that. But I saw him in the spiritual space. He was the man that was connected to a man, a real man, being a spiritual man. And he would lead his family, take us to church, and he was an incredible man that really helped me model my faith. So when I think about exposure, raising expectations as a child, he's the first foundation of seeing my faith. Is this helping you? It's not just me talking about the teachers that taught me, but I hope you also are hearing who I am identifying as forming and shaping who I become. And I hope that you're finding and realizing the people either that paved the path and the man that you become, or the connections that you need to intentionally make to help you become, because no man can become a man all by himself. Next, number 4, I'll say that Bishop Marshall, right? Bishop Marshall, when I became a teenager, he was one of my mentors that taught me my faith, right? So I had my faith growing up, where I watched my mom in faith, and that was my mom's version of salvation. But then when I graduated from high school, this man of God was the man that taught me Black history and taught me the Bible and taught me my faith and taught me how to preach. He identified the calling of God on my life. He actually gave me a job to work as a janitor in church. I was in a music group, and I was just trying to get some music, some money, so I could go and live my dream to do music. And but he recognized something significant. He gave me an opportunity, fresh out of high school, fresh off the block, fresh out the street, and he put me in church and let me be the janitor at the church, and gave me an opportunity to work in ministry in that way. Well, man, how many of you know that if you get around God and get around faith and all this stuff, my mom used to say, train up a child in the way he should go. When he get older, he would not be departed. Man, my high school years was rugged and raggedy. I was headed down a path and a direction. But when I got back in God's house and all the environment and atmosphere, man, this stuff started coming back to me. I started remembering things, and God got a hold of my heart. And although he gave me a job to do one thing, God called me into another thing. I'll never forget 6 a.m. in the morning on a Monday morning at a staff meeting. He looked across the table at me and said, I was praying this morning, and God told me the strangest thing. He says, you are not the janitor, because that was my job. I said, really? He said, yeah, because you don't know how to clean up. He said, you are not the janitor, you are the youth pastor. I said, the youth pastor? The boy just got saved. But God said that you are the youth pastor, and I need to develop. He said, do you want to work with the youth? I said, yeah, why not? He's then began to train me, and he was in seminary at the time. I had to meet with him when he got out of class. He gave me an apprenticeship. He taught me the Bible. He taught me my faith. He taught me how to preach, organize a sermon. He left me in a room to write a mission statement and a vision statement. He made me the youth pastor against the odds of the people that was in the room. He showed me ministry. He taught me my faith. And man, God did something incredible in that city as he saved me and began to cause a revival among young people, saving young people in such an emphatic way that even though people was denying the methods, they could not deny the mandate or the ministry that was coming out of my life. He took a chance on me and believed in me and saw the best in me, even though I was in raw form, in seed form, and he helped develop me. And out of that mentoring relationship, man, he took me on my first trip to Florida, first time to go to Disney World. He and my good friend Rahamid, we went to Disney. We drove all the way to Atlanta from Michigan, all the way to Atlanta, all the way to Florida, and we went to Disney World. We saw Atlanta. He exposed us to things. When we went to Disney World, we saw things in ways that we hadn't seen before, and he taught me the need to come apart before you come apart. Take a family trip and a family vacation. Every year I've been taking family vacations since I had my own family and exposing them to new environments, because this man saw me in seed form, made an investment in who I was becoming, and exposed me to new environments. I'm thankful for him. It takes a lot of men to make a man. It takes a lot of men to make a man, right? And so he gave me that practical tip to be intentional and create memories and moments for your family. Let me push on. Bishop Abney. Bishop Abney. Later on, I was able to meet Bishop Abney through Dr. Marvin Sapp. I mean, I was there in the city of Grand Rapids at a different church with Bishop Marshall, but then I also met Bishop Abney, and I met Bishop Abney because Marvin Sapp, my big brother, was my mentor. He had created moments for me to minister, to be a youth pastor, to be a youth leader, to talk to the young people. And he told me, he said, yo, this Sunday I need you to preach to the young people, but instead of preaching to them in the basement, you're going to preach to them upstairs in a big church and do your good preaching, because Bishop Abney is going to be there. He's going to be there, and you'll know if you did your good preaching, because if you preach good, he will ask you to stay. So preach good, because Bishop Abney is going to be listening. I say, oh my God, I was so nervous, man. This was at a time in my life where I was trying to quit ministry, because I had just went through the biggest failure at that moment that I had seen, and that was the failure of my family. I had gone through a divorce. I was feeling worthless. I was trying to shift. I was trying to go into a whole nother career path, and Dr. Sapp, Bishop Sapp, reached for me and was like, and created an opportunity that I couldn't deny, and put me in a place where I had to execute on my gift. Well, man, what y'all know, the story is history. I preached that Sunday morning for the early morning service, and I went back to go change my clothes. Bishop Abney came in the room. Son, you did a good preach. What you about to do next? I said, what you mean? He said, what you doing after this? I said, ain't nothing. I'm going to see my mom. He said, well, why don't you stay and preach for your next service? I said, me? You want me to preach for the next service? I went in the bathroom. I was like, yes, because I must have did my good preaching, because what he asked me to stay over, just like Marvin said. I called Marvin. I said, Bishop said, he asked me to stay. He said, man, I told you that was great. He said, this is going to be amazing. Bishop Abney introduced me to a new atmosphere, a new way of doing church, he was the godfather of the city. He was a bishop in the PAW. He exposed me to new places, new ways of thinking, new levels of ministry, new opportunity. He started to expand my horizon. He invited me to go to California for the very first time. I met him in California, got off the plane, met up with him. He was there. He was talking to Dietrich Haddon. He took me to Bishop Noel Jones Church, sat on the pulpit next to him. I was sitting like I was in a dream. Here I was in what I thought was the darkest moment, lowest moment of my life, and Bishop Abney had invited me to a new level and a new atmosphere in my life. Man, y'all already know I married his oldest granddaughter, and man, the rest is history. Pastor Erica is my lovely wife, and I'm so glad that whole situation exposed me to new exposures and new opportunities. It stepped me up outside of my comfort zone. Isaiah 54:2 says, enlarge the place of your tent, stretch your tent curtains wide, and don't hold back. When God is calling you up and out and moving you into a situation or an atmosphere beyond your regular, beyond your norm, make sure that you do not hold back. I can go on and go on. I'm telling you, I can't name them all. Apostle Richard D. Hinton, who is the spiritual father of Bishop Roy Marshall, who invited me into his home and atmospheres and church and showed me how to do church on new levels, miracles, signs, and wonder, how to pray hard, how to preach hard. He did the broadcast, man, the first broadcast in Chicago, man. It was just so many people. You gotta make sure you tap into the life's lessons, because exposures sets and raises your expectations. And once you're exposed to some things, you can never shrink back to what you used to be. Man, I was able through life and to meet mentors like Dr. Myles Munroe. I was on a family vacation, and I had always loved and followed Dr. Myles. He was my mentor before I ever knew him, because I bought all of his books and he mentored me from a distance and from afar. I would listen to his tapes. I would go whenever he's about to preach. I would be in atmospheres and environments. Sometimes you think you gotta know somebody to be mentored by them, but if you can hear the way they think, they can teach you some lessons. And I remember that my wife and I, we went on vacation to the Bahamas, and I said, I want to meet Dr. Myles Munroe. He's been my mentor for over 10 years now. And I said, I hope I get to meet him. And she said, well, let's go to church. And I never go to church on vacation. She'll go to church in a heartbeat. But I went to church while I was on vacation, and man, I said, he's going to be there. Let's go to church. I was there. He was up teaching. I was so happy. I said, I'm about to meet Dr. Myles. If I get to meet him, I'm going to put a seed in his hand. I want to sow this seed in his hand. And the man got up at the end, was like, Dr. Myles is not going to be meeting anybody today. And I said, dang. And then he looked back. He said, who said that? And they said, well, it's too many people. He said, no, I'm going to stand right over here and meet anybody that want to meet. I was so happy. Man, I went over to the side, and it was a long line. I was at the end of the line. I had wrote out my seed, and I walked up to him. I said, Dr. Myles, it's so pleasure to meet you. You've been an incredible mentor and teacher of mine over the years. I've read your books. So I just want to put this seed in your hand. Who do I rank it out to? He said, who is it for? I said, it's for you. He said, well, make it out to me. I wrote the seed out to him. He said, what do you want me to pray? I said, I just believe in God. You know what to pray. He said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pray and believe, since you met me through my books, I'm going to pray that God gives you a system for writing books and all the people that you need connected to you, so you'll be able to produce books. He said, because what you put in a book leaves a legacy in the earth that long after you're gone, people will still be able to hear your voice. I put that seed in his hand. He prayed that prayer over me, man. I'm on my 21st book. You hear me? Seed sowing, time, opportunity, moments, believing. That's how I got a part of his mentoring group. I was put in his mentoring group. I got in a small rooms with him, with other kingdom mind thinkers. That's where I learned the kingdom, and that's where I met my spiritual father, Dr. Martin Williams. Man, Dr. Martin Williams is a son of Myles Munroe, and he would teach at all of his conferences. And I appreciated all the other people that was there, but it was something unique and special about Dr. Martin. Every time I heard him, that stirred something up inside of me, and I would just be excited whenever he was going to preach. Well, one day after he finished preaching, I just went out to his book table, and he had a bunch of books on his table, and I just bought all of his books. And his wife, Mom, Pastor Linnell, was out there. She said, who are you? I said, my name is Jermone Glenn. I just wanted to, I don't need to know Dr. Martin. I just want to buy all his books. She said, you want to buy all of his books? She said, where your wife at? I said, she upstairs. My wife would come to the Bahamas to the conference, but she wasn't coming down. She was sitting by the beach. She said, where your wife at? I said, she upstairs. She said, she let a good looking man like you walk down here by yourself? I said, she ain't worried about me. She introduced me to Dr. Martin. She's like, this young man bought all your books at your table. He brought every book on the table. Dr. Martin said, really? He said, why would you do that? I said, I just appreciate every time you minister, so I just wanted to buy all your books so I could know who you are. He's like, really? He wrote down his phone. He said, well, why don't you call me? I said, where are you at? He said, Omaha. I said, Omaha, Nebraska? He said, yeah. And then Mom Williams said, yeah, we in Omaha. Once you come, then you'll get it. And so he wrote down his number and gave me an opportunity to reach out to him. I called him. He answered the phone. I said, oh, you gave me your real number? He said, yeah. And I was able to fly into Omaha when Dr. Myles was teaching, and I saw the campus there, and I met his family, and he really shifted my paradigm on how to do family and business. I saw the land, the real estate, the business that he owned, how he just shifted my paradigm in the kingdom and really taught me the importance of building stability and legacy. He's another mega man and a mega moment that shifted my entire life. Through him, I met Bishop Tudor Bismarck. Man, I used to watch Bishop Tudor Bismarck preach. I used to listen to him preach. I went to Manpower. I went to the Pastors and Leaders Conference in Dallas, Texas. I flew there, and Bishop preached the anointing of 1,000 times more, lay hands on me, fell out. I sat there, and this was years ago. And when I met Dr. Martin introduced me to Bishop Bismarck, and I could not believe I was sitting in a room with Bishop Bismarck. He would prophesy over me and my wife and speak life over us. He introduced us to Bishop Joseph Garlington. Bishop Joseph Garlington would pray over us. Bishop Bismarck teach me how to think in the Bible, preach, dig deep for nuggets. Man, just so many moments just connected to the next moment, and every moment led me to the next moment. Man, over 10 years ago, 15 years ago now, through just mutual conversations, I met Pastor John Hanna. People kept saying, do you know Pastor Hanna? Do you know Pastor Hanna? I didn't really officially know Pastor Hanna, but Pastor Hanna used to be an adjutant to Bishop Willie James Campbell, and Bishop Willie James Campbell and Bishop Roy Marshall was great friends. Bishop Campbell used to come to Grand Rapids to preach and run revivals, and Bishop Roy Marshall and Bishop Willie James Campbell, they was good friends, and Pastor Hanna was Bishop Campbell's adjutant or youth pastor, and I was Pastor Hanna's adjutant and youth pastor. So we saw each other, but we didn't talk. We just looked, we nodded, we knew who we were, and that was that. But people kept bringing our name up. Do y'all know each other? Do y'all know each other? I said, no, I don't really know him. And I told my wife, I said, man, people keep asking me, do I know this Pastor Hanna? I think I might reach out to him and say, what's up? She said, you should do it. You should network. You should figure out who he is. And then one day I went to my inbox on Facebook, and Pastor Hanna had inboxed me. It's like, bro, I've seen what you're doing. You're out the box. You're an out the box thinker. Keep being incredible. I'm encouraging you. Got a friend in Chicago. I was like, babe, that dude, Pastor Hanna, he inboxed me on Facebook and told me to encourage myself. She's like, for real? I said, yeah, he gave me his number. So I called him. I was like, what's up, bro? People keep asking me, do I know you? I didn't know you. It's a pleasure to meet you. Man, we became fast friends. I came up here. He showed me church. He was on the radio at that time, man. That one Thursday I flew in here, he wore me out. That morning started at 4:00 in the morning. We went to the radio. We left the radio. We went to the office. He went to the haircut. We did the office. We came back. We got ready for Bible study. Went at the Bible study. That day ended at like 10 o'clock at night. I was like, you do this every week? He's like, yes. But he exposed me to mega. Exposure raises your expectations. He at that time had a mega ministry, but it was still building. It was thriving. He was doing all this with pop-up church. I remember I went to the forum and sat with him for all 4 services on a Sunday and sat in the environment, watch how it went and clicked and all the moving pieces. I remember I sowed a seed in that environment of what they were building. And I learned how mega moves and how mega works. He gave me a front row seat into his life, man. We used to go do shopping, and he liked to shop on Michigan Avenue at the Ralph Lauren store. I mean, my most expensive suit at that time, I bought in that space, and it was just exposure to new ideas. He exposed me to mega and taught me how to dream beyond limits. What am I saying? I'm saying manhood is motto, and exposure raises expectations. You have to sit down while you think you don't have nothing and count up the cost of all the people, what they taught me. And that's just after. I mean, I got some great lessons from the block, and that's a whole nother episode. I mean, I got some great lessons from teachers and mentors and dudes from the hood that taught me things that I needed to learn to become a man, taught me things that were valuable about how to treat a woman and not valuable about how to treat a woman. But exposure raises expectations. And so every time you have have these pivotal encounters with people, it shifts and changes you. So never underestimate the power of an encounter, because it's always teaching you something. I hope as I've reflected on some of the men that have impacted my life, and you can go get and really read it in detail in my book Mentors, because it'll show you how mentors give you momentum and mentors are a model for your future. I just want you to realize that men in your life have shaped you, have mentored you, and will help you to impact and achieve greatness. And if you even feel like you don't have it, make sure that you go after it. And I wasn't trying to name drop today. I just had to give honor to whom honor is due. And there's still so many other men that I could honor that been a part of the foundation of my life. If you don't remember anything, Proverbs 27:17 says, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. I just wanted to really pour out and share how this one experience can impact you over and over again. Exposure raises your expectations. So I want to proclaim over you that you will honor the lessons and the legacy of those that help shape you, that you will not devaluate any encounter that anybody had, whether they taught you something great or taught you something that was not so great. You can learn lessons even from a fool, but thank God for the friends and the people that God put in front of you. You will honor them. You will remember that you are your teachers, you are your coaches, you are the people that poured into you, right? And that as you expand your new horizons and raise your expectations, that whenever somebody meets you, they meet your teachers and they meet your mentors. You will pursue experiences that expand your vision and elevate your expectations. Hey, and here's the most important one. You will live what you learn. You will teach what you know. You will live what you learn, and you will be who you wish you had. You will teach what you know, you will live what you learn, and you will be what you wish you had. I hope that this was good for you. Share it with another brother. Say something in the chat. Give me some feedback. And if it bless you, hey, it's an opportunity always for you to sow. Thank you for hanging out with me for the fireside chat at Manhood, because it's the only hood that you need to be a part of. Peace.